Hello, my friends. Welcome back. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
I never used to be afraid of the dark. Not really. Growing up, my parents joked that I had night vision, that I'd wander the house at night without a single worry. But all that changed one Friday in November, and it started the way most things do, innocent enough. I was home alone. My roommate had gone out for a weekend trip to visit her family, and I had the apartment to myself. I planned on a quiet night, maybe some takeout and a movie. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the city streets glowing with the yellow-orange glare of streetlights. I locked the door behind me, went straight to the couch, and tried to relax. It was quiet at first. Too quiet, maybe. I didn't think anything of it until I saw movement outside the living room window. At first, I thought it was a neighbor walking their dog or someone passing in the streetlight's glare. But when I squinted, I realized there was no one there. Just the shadow of a figure, tall, still, standing near the alley behind the apartment building. I froze. I should have looked away, ignored it, but I couldn't. Something about it felt wrong. I grabbed my phone and texted my roommate. Hey, just saw someone outside. Weird. No response, of course. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a trick of the light, a code on a garbage can, my imagination running wild. I pulled the blinds down, turned on the TV, anything to distract myself. But that figure never went away. It just stood there, watching. Hours passed, and the shadow remained. Every time I looked, it hadn't moved an inch. My heart began to race. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there was no reason anyone would target me. I live in a decent neighborhood, not some crime-ridden block. Still, something in me told me to be cautious. I checked the locks again 1, 2, 3 times, then sat back down, trying to calm myself. I told myself to stay rational. Maybe it was a homeless person seeking warmth, maybe a neighbor. But when I glanced out the window again, I realized it wasn't just standing there. Its head turned slowly, as if it knew I was watching. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to call someone, but my phone showed zero signal. I paced the apartment, trying to think of what to do. Should I leave? Go to a hotel? But leaving meant passing the window, passing that figure. By midnight, I was a mess of nerves. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me. Every wind gust sounded like a whisper. I pulled the curtains tight, sat in the corner of the living room, knife in hand. Not that I expected it to help, but I couldn't leave it down. And then it happened. A knock. Not at the door, not at a window. The walls themselves seemed to reverberate with it. Knock. Slow. Deliberate. Knock. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't respond. Another knock. And then a whisper. Not a word, just the sound of air brushing against something, like a mouth barely open. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the rational thoughts wouldn't come. The knocking stopped. The whispering stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. I thought I was safe, that maybe it had gone. But then, from outside the apartment door, came another sound, a scratching, something sharp, dragging across the wood. I bolted to the door, gripping the knob. My hand shook so violently I could barely turn it. Whoever, or whatever, was out there trying to get in. I backed away, heart hammering, then realized I wasn't hearing footsteps retreating. I wasn't hearing anything except that soft, insistent scratch, slowly moving down the door like it was circling me, learning me. And then I heard it, my name, whispered, low. I swear to God, it was my name. I ran to the bedroom, locked the door, shoved the dresser against it. I grabbed my laptop, my phone, anything to call for help. No signal, no Wi-Fi. It was like the apartment itself had gone offline. I tried every number, every app, nothing. I was alone, completely alone. Hours passed. The scratching never stopped. It moved around the apartment, sometimes behind me, sometimes at the door, always just out of sight. I was too scared to leave the bedroom. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. And then, in the early morning, when the sky began to gray with the first hints of dawn, I heard something else. A voice, clear this time, speaking right outside the bedroom door. I know what you did. I froze. My mind went blank. I hadn't done anything. Nothing illegal, nothing immoral. I live a normal life. What could it mean? The knocking, the scratching, the whispering all stopped. Silence. For the first time all night, absolute quiet. I didn't dare breathe. I waited for hours. The morning sunlight finally began to spill into the bedroom. Hesitant, I inched toward the door. Nothing. No sound. No figure. Just a faint outline of scratches along the wood. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. No one. No footprints. No sign of anything except a single note, taped neatly to the floor where my door had been scratched. It read, "You can't hide forever." I took the note and ran. I left everything behind. Apartment, belongings, even my car. I drove hundreds of miles away, rented a room in a motel, stayed with friends, anywhere far enough to feel safe. For a while, I thought I was free. But late at night, when I close my eyes, I can still see the shadow, still hear the whisper. And last week, as I was walking home from the grocery store, I saw it again. Across the street, standing perfectly still, watching me. I ran into my apartment, locked the door, and looked out the window. But there it was, just standing there. And then something impossible happened. It waved. A wave, and a voice from nowhere and everywhere said, "I'll be outside forever." I haven't slept properly since. I don't open the door for anyone. I don't answer calls I don't recognize. I don't look outside when I hear movement. Because I know the truth now. The someone outside doesn't leave. Not really. They just wait, and they learn, and they come back. I sometimes think about moving again, but no matter where I go, I know I can never escape them. And one night, when I'm not looking, when I let my guard down, they'll be there. Outside, watching, waiting. And I won't even hear them knock. I never thought I'd regret being home alone. My parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving me with the house to myself, which I had been looking forward to for weeks. At 15, it felt like freedom, the kind where you could eat ice cream for dinner, watch TV until your eyes burned, and scream at the empty house without anyone telling you to shut up. That Friday night started normally. I made myself a sandwich, grabbed a soda, and settled on the couch. Outside, the street was quiet, the way it always is at night in our suburban neighborhood. I even felt proud of myself, like I was finally old enough to handle this kind of responsibility. But it didn't take long for things to feel off. I was watching an old horror movie when I first noticed the smell. It was faint at first, like something burning lightly, but there was no smoke, no fire anywhere in the house. I got up and checked the kitchen, the laundry room, the basement. Nothing. Every appliance was off, every light bulb unbroken. I chalked it up to imagination, my mind linking the smell to the movie I was watching. Then I heard it, a knock, soft and deliberate, coming from the back door. I froze. The door was locked, and no one was supposed to be there. I peeked through the window, but the backyard was empty, shrouded in shadows. Must be the wind, I whispered to myself, though my voice trembled more than I wanted it to. I went back to the couch, trying to ignore it, but then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate, moving across the hardwood floor in the hall leading to the bedrooms. My heart started racing. I had never felt the house feel so big and empty at the same time. I grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door, gripping it like a lifeline. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer, just the dragging of footsteps, then a pause like whoever or whatever it was listening. I backed toward the kitchen, thinking I could barricade myself there, maybe call the police. But when I reached for my phone, I realized it was dead. No signal. The house, the street, even my own bedroom felt like it had disappeared. It was just me, the darkness, and the presence that had arrived without warning. Then the lights went out. Total darkness. I stayed frozen, listening, trying to control my breathing. And then I heard it, a whisper, just barely audible, moving from room to room, closer and closer. "You shouldn't be alone," it said. I bolted for the basement, thinking maybe I could hide among the boxes and old furniture. But as I descended the stairs, I saw the shadow first. A shape darker than the dark, twisting and impossible, stretching across the walls like it belonged to no natural form. It moved toward me. I stumbled backward, falling down the last few stairs. Pain shot through my arm, but I barely noticed. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the door leading outside. It was locked. Impossible. I had left it unlocked earlier. I ran to the front door, praying it would open. It didn't. Then I realized I couldn't hear the wind, couldn't hear the street, couldn't hear anything but the whispering. The house had changed. It wasn't the house I knew anymore. I slammed against the door, screaming, and that's when I saw them. Faces. Hundreds of faces pressed against the glass of every window, pale and expressionless. Mouths open, eyes dark and empty. I staggered back in horror. And then it stopped. Silence. I collapsed to the floor, shaking, every instinct telling me to run, but I couldn't. And that's when I noticed the mirror in the hallway. I didn't recognize the reflection staring back at me. My skin was pale, almost translucent. My eyes were dark. My mouth was slightly open, mimicking the expressions of the faces outside. Panic overtook me. I ran toward the stairs to get out, but the layout of the house had changed. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Doors appeared where there hadn't been any. I felt like I was trapped in a labyrinth, a house that had grown around me while I wasn't looking. I finally found a room that looked like my bedroom, but it wasn't mine anymore. The walls were black, the floor slick like wet stone, and in the middle, a figure stood. It was me, not a twin, not a shadow, but a perfect replica, smiling, waiting. "You've been alone for so long," it said, voice exactly like mine but slower, colder. "You're finally ready." I screamed, lunging at it, but my hands passed through it like I was trying to grab smoke. The figure reached out and touched my chest. A freezing sensation ripped through me, and everything went black. When I woke, I was lying on the couch. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, and the house looked normal again. My parents were still away. My phone had full signal. Everything was exactly as it should be. I told myself it had been a dream, a nightmare brought on by too many scary movies. But when I stood up and looked in the mirror, I realized the truth. It was smiling. Not me, not the real me, but someone or something that had learned to live in my body. And outside, through the window, I could see hundreds of pale faces staring at the house, waiting. I ran to the door, but I wasn't the one opening it anymore. I was already inside. And the house wasn't mine. Not anymore. I never believed in cursed places until Alaska proved to me that a place doesn't need to be cursed to be wrong. I was born in Washington State and raised on stories about the last frontier. My grandfather worked a pipeline in the 70s and talked about Alaska like it was alive, beautiful, brutal, honest. When he died, he left me a small amount of money and a handwritten note that said, "Go north once. You'll understand." So I did. I took a job hauling fuel and supplies to remote villages along the Yukon River. It was seasonal work, dangerous but well paid, and I told myself it was temporary. Most of our runs were routine. Long hours, white horizons, radios crackling with weather updates, and nothing else. The isolation felt heavy at first, but eventually it became familiar, like background noise. The run that changed everything was supposed to be simple. One stop, one delivery, fly in, unload, fly out before dark. The village didn't have a name on our maps, just a faded and a handwritten note from dispatch, seasonal population. Confirm landing conditions by radio. We tried calling as we approached. No answer. That wasn't unusual. Radios failed all the time out there. The village appeared below us as a handful of dark shapes pressed into the snow near a bend in the frozen river. No smoke, no tracks, no signs of recent movement. Still, the airstrip looked clear. We landed. The moment my boots hit the ground, something felt off. Not fear, not danger, just a deep sense that I didn't belong there. The cold was sharper than it should have been, biting through layers like they weren't there at all. The village was silent in a way I hadn't experienced before. Even the wind seemed hesitant. My co-pilot stayed with the plane while I walked toward the nearest building, calling out. No response. The structures were old, some barely standing, their doors hanging open as if abandoned mid-motion. Inside the first building, I found dishes still on the table, blankets folded neatly, boots by the door. No people. I told myself it was seasonal, just like dispatch said. Maybe everyone was out hunting. Maybe I'd missed them by a day. Then I noticed the calendars. Everyone I saw was turned to the same date. March 14th. No years circled. No notes. Just that date, over and over again. The radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. "Do not stay," a voice said. Not panicked, not rushed. Calm, female, familiar in a way I couldn't place. I answered instinctively. "Who is this?" Silence. I hurried back toward the plane, my breath fogging thick in front of me. That was when I realized there were no animal tracks anywhere. No fox, no birds, not even the faint marks of mice beneath the snow. The land was untouched, like it had been paused. Halfway back, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn right away. I knew better. Every instinct screamed that if I turned, something would change permanently. The footsteps stopped when I stopped. "Hello," I said, my voice thin. "I told you not to stay," the voice said again, closer now. I turned. It was a woman standing about 20 feet away, wearing heavy winter gear that looked decades old. Her face was pale, almost translucent, eyes dark and reflective like deep water. "You shouldn't be here," she said gently. "We try to warn them too." "Who?" I asked. "All of us," she said, gesturing toward the village. I swallowed. "What happened here?" She smiled, and it was the saddest thing I've ever seen. "We stayed." The world shifted then, not visually, not dramatically. It felt more like a pressure change, like my ears popping after a deep dive. Suddenly, the village wasn't empty anymore. People stood everywhere, dozens of them, men, women, children, all silent, all watching me. None of them blinked. "We didn't leave when we should have," the woman continued. "The cold came early. Supplies didn't arrive. Radios failed. Time stopped behaving normally. Some of us died. The rest," she trailed off. "What are you?" I asked. "Not what," she corrected. "When..." The pressure intensified, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Images flooded my mind. People freezing in their homes, starvation, desperation, the slow realization that no rescue was coming. Days stretching into weeks, weeks folding into nothing. "You're seeing us on the wrong side of it," she said. "You're early." "Early for what?" "For March 14th. I didn't understand then, but I would. The woman stepped closer. "If you stay, you'll finish the loop. If you leave, it will close." "What happens to you if I leave?" Her smile returned. "We finally finish freezing." That snapped something in me. I backed away, shaking my head. "I can't. I'm sorry." "I know," she said. "We were too." I ran. The village vanished behind me as I reached the plain, like fog burned away by sunlight. My co-pilot looked at me like I'd lost my mind, asking where the villagers were. I couldn't answer. We took off immediately. Back at base, I tried to report what happened. Dispatch had no record of the village. No dot on the map. No delivery scheduled. The fuel was still on the plane. I quit the job 2 days later. Years passed. Life went on. I convinced myself it had been stress, hypoxia, my brain misfiring in the cold. Until March 14th of last year. I woke up that morning unable to move, my body heavy and numb, breath shallow. Frost covered the inside of my bedroom window despite the heat being on. My phone showed the date clearly. March 14th. For a brief moment, I wasn't in my house anymore. I was standing in that village again, surrounded by silent people, the woman watching me with relief in her eyes. "You left," she said, "so now you remember." The pressure lifted. I could breathe again. The frost melted. The vision faded. Since that day, I've researched everything I can. Lost villages, missing settlements, time anomalies in extreme cold. There are records, stories dismissed as folklore, reports buried under explanations that don't quite fit. I know now that I didn't escape. I inherited it. Every year, on March 14th, I feel the cold return for a few seconds longer than before. I see them more clearly. I hear more voices. And I understand the note my grandfather left me. Some places don't want company. They want witnesses. I never thought a vacation could feel like a death sentence. The Aurora sky promised everything. Luxury, endless ocean, and the chance to escape my tiny, stressful life for a week of indulgence. I boarded in Miami with the other passengers, all smiles and sun hats, none of us aware that the ship's grandeur was hiding something rotten beneath its polished decks. The first day was perfect, almost laughably so. The sun sparkled off the water, the buffet overflowed with shrimp and champagne, and the crew glided through the corridors like ghosts in crisp uniforms. I laughed too, but every time I passed a dark hallway or a closed cabin door, a shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't explain it. Something about the ship felt wrong. By the second day, the unease became impossible to ignore. I woke early, drawn to the upper deck, where the ocean stretched endlessly. That's when I noticed it. Shadows moving beneath the water, too slow, too deliberate to be fish. They followed the ship, matching our speed exactly, but when I blinked, they vanished. That afternoon, strange things began to happen inside. Hallways I had walked a dozen times twisted into angles that didn't exist. I would pass a door, and when I turned back, it led somewhere entirely different. One minute, it was a crew storage closet, the next a corridor lined with cabins I hadn't seen before. I called the front desk, but the phone line was dead, and the corridors behind me seemed endless, like a maze that rearranged itself. Other passengers started noticing too. A man in a suit asked me if I'd seen the same hallway loop 3 times, and a mother whispered about her son disappearing from the kids' club. The staff brushed it off, smiling too widely, moving too quickly, and avoiding eye contact. That night, I tried to sleep, but the ship had its own rhythm. I heard steps outside my cabin door, slow, deliberate, sometimes stopping just short of it. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. Just the long, dark hallway stretching away from me. On the third day, the fog rolled in from nowhere. Thick, white, and unnatural, it swallowed the decks and clung to the windows like a living thing. Visibility dropped to a few feet. The horn sounded endlessly, though no one seemed to be steering. People started disappearing in plain sight. A couple I had met at breakfast vanished from the dining hall. Their chairs were empty, plates still warm. The crew said nothing. The passengers who noticed were too terrified to speak. I wandered the decks alone, searching for an exit or a clue. That's when I saw her, a woman, pale, hair plastered to her face, standing at the railing. She turned toward me slowly, eyes black, hollow. Her mouth opened as if to scream, but no sound came. Then she dissolved into the fog, leaving only the echo of something ancient, like a memory pressing against my brain. Hours, or maybe days, passed. Time didn't exist. Food disappeared, water turned brackish, and the sun never moved. I ran through hallways that led nowhere, stairs that went down but ended on the deck, and doors that opened into walls. The ship was alive. I began to understand, in fragments, that it fed on us, not in the sense of eating, but in the sense of swallowing. It trapped us, made us part of itself, erased us from the world. By the fourth night, I could hear voices in the fog. Not whispers, not cries. Singing. Hundreds of voices harmonizing in a haunting, impossible melody that made my teeth ache and my stomach twist. I followed it, hoping to find other survivors, but it only led me to a stairwell that ended mid-air, opening into nothing. I fell. When I woke, I was in the ship's engine room, or something that resembled it. Pipes twisted like veins, machinery hummed with a life of its own, and in the center, a pool of black water swirled. Figures moved beneath the surface, pale, faceless, reaching up toward me. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. A voice spoke, not through the air, but in my mind. "You've seen too much," it said. "You belong now." I felt a pull, as if invisible hands were dragging me toward the water. I fought, kicking and screaming, but I could feel myself dissolving, my body growing lighter, my mind unraveling. And then, in a sudden rush of clarity, I remembered something. Ships never move on their own. They need someone to steer them. I ran, not knowing where I was going. The corridors twisted and turned, and for the first time, I felt the ship hesitate, as if confused. I burst onto the bridge. The captain was gone. All the controls were blinking erratically, and the instruments were impossible to read. But then I saw it, a small hatch, mark escape. I jumped through, falling onto a lifeboat. I rowed as fast as I could, pushing through the fog. The singing faded behind me, replaced by silence. For the first time in days, I saw the horizon, faint but real. I thought I was free. But then I heard it. Not a voice, not singing, just the sound of metal on metal, and I turned. The aurora sky was rising from the fog, but it wasn't normal. Its hull was twisted, jagged, edges sharp like broken glass. The lights were red, pulsing, and the deck was crawling with shadows. And at the bow, I saw hundreds of faceless figures, all turned to watch me, reaching with impossible arms. I tried to row faster, but the boat didn't move. The water thickened, dragging me back. I struggled, feeling it pull me toward the ship. And then, in a sudden twist, I realized I had never really left the aurora sky. The lifeboat, the fog, even the ocean, they were part of it. The ship had been showing me freedom, testing me, and I had failed. I felt myself pulled aboard, the deck swallowing me whole. But as I hit the surface, I wasn't terrified anymore. A strange calm filled me. I understood, finally, that this was no accident, no malice. The ship was ancient, older than any ocean charted, and it had a purpose. To survive, it needed passengers, souls willing to embrace its reality. And I did. I am writing this now, not for help, not for warning. That would be pointless. You won't find the aurora sky on any radar. No cruise line claims it. It appears to those who need it, those who seek escape. And I write this because one day, someone else will board, and I will show them the ship as it truly is. I am part of it now, but I am not afraid. Not anymore. The aurora sky drifts endlessly, waiting for the next traveler. And sometimes late at night, I see her, pale, hair plastered, eyes hollow, and I smile. She is next. I've always thought of myself as someone who could handle the wilderness. Growing up in the Midwest, my dad would take me camping every summer, and I learned to respect the woods without fearing them. Or at least, that's what I thought. Last August, I decided to hike a trail in one of the most remote areas of Glacier National Park. I didn't want to go alone, but none of my friends were available, and there was something appealing about being utterly alone for a few days. I wanted solitude, I wanted peace, and I wanted a challenge. The first day went perfectly. I hiked the trail, set up my tent by a small creek, and watched the sunset paint the jagged peaks in golden red. I told myself this was exactly why I loved the parks. Untouched, wild, beautiful. But that night, I noticed something strange. I woke around 2 a.m. There was a light, dim, flickering, moving in the woods. My first thought was another camper, but the park was supposed to be empty in this area. Curiosity overpowered caution. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The light seemed to dance just beyond the trees. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Silence. I walked toward it, and the air grew colder. And then I saw the first sign that something was wrong. Footprints. They were too large to be mine, too deep to be from any animal I knew. They led into the forest, fading into shadows. Against my better judgment, I followed. Eventually, I emerged into a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center was a rock formation that looked deliberate, like a circle someone had arranged. And then I saw them. Figures. Not human, not quite. They were tall, thin, their limbs oddly elongated, and their skin almost reflective. They didn't move at first, just stood there, staring at me. One of them tilted its head, and I could swear it was smiling. I took a step back, and suddenly they were moving, slow, jerky, almost unnatural. I turned and ran. The forest seemed alive now, closing in around me. Every path I tried led me back to that same clearing. Always there, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I ran before I stumbled into a cave. Inside, the smell of earth and decay was heavy. I stayed there for hours, praying that whatever was out there couldn't find me. When morning came, the world outside looked wrong. Trees twisted at impossible angles, the trail completely vanished, and the mountains looked like they were pressing in on me. I ran downhill, hoping to find a road. Then I saw a figure in the distance. A woman standing by a tree. She waved. Relief flooded me. I ran toward her. "Please help me," I gasped. She turned. Her eyes were black, her mouth too wide, stretching unnaturally as she smiled. She just stared, and then more figures appeared behind her, dozens of them. One of them stepped forward, its elongated fingers curling. And then, to my horror, it whispered my name. I bolted. Trees seemed to shift, paths changed under my feet, and the shadows followed. I stumbled, fell into a river, and let the current carry me. Hours later, I washed up near the park boundary. The forest behind me was still, like nothing had happened. I thought I'd escaped, but that night, back in a motel, I couldn't sleep. Something kept scratching at the walls, and then I saw it in my reflection. A shadow, standing just behind me. Its shape was wrong, too tall, too thin. I spun, but the room was empty. While I looked back in the mirror, it was closer. I faced it. "You don't get me," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't have me." It tilted its head, and for a moment, I saw recognition in its eyes. Then it vanished. I left the country for a while, but it wasn't gone. I've seen shadows in my apartment, heard my name whispered in the wind. I survived because I refused to belong to it. I survived because I refused to be swallowed by that other world. And I know someday it will come back. But next time I'll be ready. Because in the end, that's the only way to survive the park. Not by running, not by hiding, but by facing it. I thought I knew the mountains. I'd spent most of my life hiking and camping across the Appalachians and Rockies, chasing trails, peaks, and waterfalls, always chasing that sense of freedom that only comes from standing above the world. But nothing had prepared me for what I encountered last fall on a ridge in the Bitterroots. It started as a normal backpacking trip with a group of friends. 5 of us in total, all experienced hikers, carrying week-long supplies and enough gear to survive anything the backcountry could throw at us, or so we thought. We planned our route carefully, a circuit along a high ridge, far from main roads, deep into unmarked wilderness. The maps we had were old, but accurate enough, or so I believed. The first 2 days were exactly what I expected. Crisp air, breathtaking vistas, the smell of pine and wet earth. We joked around the campfires at night, roasted hot dogs, and told exaggerated ghost stories. I remember thinking as I stared at the stars, how perfect it all felt. Then, on the third day, the trail started to feel wrong. Not in a physical sense, rocks, roots, and elevation were as expected, but in a way that prickled the back of my mind. The forest seemed too quiet, like the usual background hum of wildlife had vanished. Birds no longer called, squirrels vanished from the trees, and even the wind seemed hesitant. By mid-afternoon, we noticed the trail markers had disappeared. Not just faded, gone. The worn carvings on trees, the painted blazes that had guided countless hikers, were nowhere to be found. At first, we joked. Maybe the forest rangers had repainted the route, or maybe we had wandered slightly off the path. But as we continued, the unease grew. Every rock, every fallen branch seemed deliberately placed, almost like someone or something had arranged them to guide us somewhere. By evening, we were officially lost. Our GPS insisted we were somewhere we weren't, coordinates spinning as if the device itself was confused. The sun sank behind jagged peaks, shadows stretching into unnatural shapes. We made a small camp on a rocky outcrop, huddled together for warmth, and tried to rationalize what had happened. Around midnight, I woke to the sensation of being watched. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of awareness, a pressure at the edge of perception. Then I saw movement, a shadow in the trees, impossibly dark, like the night itself had taken form. My first thought was a deer, or maybe a bear, but it didn't move like either. It stood upright, just beyond the firelight, staring at us. I froze. My friends were asleep, unaware. I called out softly, but the figure didn't respond. It didn't move closer. It didn't move away. It simply watched. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I thought I'd imagined it. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe the lack of sleep and the eerie forest combined into a hallucination. The next morning, we tried to backtrack. Every path we took seemed to lead us deeper into unfamiliar territory. I began to notice small things, tiny details that didn't make sense. Trees scarred with deep, vertical scratches, rocks stacked in angular patterns, patches of ground where grass and moss had been flattened, as if something massive had dragged itself across it. By the fourth day, panic had set in. Food was running low, and we were exhausted. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself was alive, deliberately steering us. That's when I noticed the carvings. Faint at first, in the bark of twisted pines, scratches that almost resembled symbols, letters, maybe, or numbers. They seemed random, but repeated patterns emerged, like some dark language woven into the woods. Then we saw it, the cabin. It shouldn't have been there. The map made no mention of it, and I'd never read about any structure in this section of the mountains. It was small, old, and weathered, barely holding together, but something about it drew us in. We were desperate, cold, and lost, so we approached. The door creaked as we opened it, the inside dark and surprisingly clean. Dust-covered furniture, a broken table, but no signs of life. I moved to a window and looked out. The forest around us was the same, quiet, unnervingly still. Then I saw the first sign. On the wall, carved deep into the wood, were names. Hundreds of them. Carved meticulously over decades, some fresh, some weathered by time. Names of hikers who had gone missing over the years. Names of people I recognized from local news reports. A cold chill ran down my spine. My friends, sensing my fear, didn't want to stay, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. There were patterns, sequences, and dates. And then I realized something worse. Some of the names had dates from last month. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed shut behind us. I spun around, but no one was there. The shadows in the corners stretched unnaturally, darkening into shapes that didn't belong. We screamed, bashed on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic turned to terror, and then we heard it, a low, guttural whisper repeating our names over and over from every corner of the room. We tried the windows, locked. We screamed again. And then the carvings, they began to move. Letters shifted, scratched themselves deeper into the wood. Names we didn't recognize appeared. Then one of my friends, Rachel, screamed. I turned to see her staring at the wall, her finger pointing. On the wooden planks was my name, freshly carved. I felt my heart stop. I remember screaming, pounding on the walls, begging for this to be a nightmare. And in that moment, the cabin seemed to exhale. A gust of wind knocked us off our feet, dust and splinters filling the air. Shadows stretched, twisted, and then nothing. When I woke, I was alone. The forest outside the cabin was the same, sun high in the sky. There was no cabin, no trail, no friends, just me, standing on a ridge, utterly lost. I ran hours, maybe days, I don't know. Time seemed irrelevant. Eventually, I stumbled onto a road, flagged down a ranger, and reported everything. They searched the area. They found nothing. No cabin, no carvings, no trail. Local hikers laughed at my story, calling it a hallucination, a case of mountain fever. I wanted to believe that. I really did, but I can't forget. And here's the thing. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. On it was my name, freshly carved, exactly as I had seen it in the cabin. And below it, a note, "We are waiting." I left the mountains after that. I don't hike anymore, don't camp, don't even drive near wilderness trails. But sometimes, late at night, I feel the mountains calling me. The whisper of trees, the brush of wind across my skin. It's subtle, almost polite, but I know what it means. I know I'm not done. Not yet. Because whatever is in those mountains isn't human, and it doesn't forgive. And one day, I fear I will return, not by choice, but because it wants me. And when I do, I'm not sure anyone will be left to find me.
Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next video.